Okay, Greta, 20th Century Women. Let's talk about that one first.
Sure.
Abby,
Yes.
what attracted you to her?
Well, I mean, initially, before I even read the script, I knew I really liked Mike Mills's movies, and Thumbsucker and Beginners, and even I was aware of the music videos he had directed and the commercials he had directed, and he always seemed to be in a conversation about cinema, even when he wasn't specifically making a movie. So I was primed to like it, and then I read the script, and I felt very protective of Abby, which is always a sign for me when I feel like I want to take care of a character, and it feels like even if I don't get the film, that part of me is activated, and I hope that whoever gets the part is takes care of them. And I met with Mike, and I loved the script, and I felt like when I read the script I could really see it. There was a way he wrote it, that he had a lot of dialogue on one side of the page, and then on the other side images that were going along with it, which is an unusual way to write a screenplay, but because I knew his work, I felt like I could really visualize it, which is unique. And yeah, I met with him, and I loved talking to him, and then I didn't hear anything for a very long time, and then he called me up and asked me if I wanted to play Abby, and I was thrilled, and I had a lot of time to prepare for it. So it really was a journey I went on, and we worked a lot in prep, which is always it's my preferred way of working. I like a long runway. It's very stressful when you get a job and then you have to do it. Even in the next month, it's too fast. So I knew about 6 months before I did it, and that was how I was ready to do it from the minute I read it. But I was glad he took his time, but he chose me.
This era of the late 70s, that's a little before you were born.
Yes.
Yeah. But she just, I remember that time frame. She just really fits into that world.
She does. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It was the late 70s is before my time, but I feel very connected to that time. And I also particularly feel connected to Abby's story of being from California and going to New York and coming back to California. And the feeling of California was something that Mike and I talked a lot about. I mean, I'm from up north, and I'm not from the beach, but that relentless sunlight, if you are a punk, is hard. And it was also based on his sister. I mean, the germ of the character was based on his sister, and I got to talk to his sister a lot, which was really helpful. And I didn't feel obligated to play her necessarily. He gave us the freedom to create our own fictional characters, but it was this connection to this real person that was helpful. And she talked to me a lot about her life in the 70s and New York and Santa Barbara, and her relationship with her mother, and how it felt, even how days felt in 1978, 79, and what it felt like to discover music, and what it felt like to talk on the phone, and the way New York was and the way Santa Barbara was. And it's a really, I think it's tricky when you're in 2016 to get into the pace of an earlier life, and I felt like I tried to only listen to records and to never use my smartphone and to be lost, which is something that it's hard to do now, because I think it gets in your body a kind of different rhythm.
I'm glad you mentioned the music. It just plays such a key role in this movie,
Yeah.
and the choices Mike made on which songs, which bands to feature.
Yes.
But it means a lot to Abby. I mean, that
Yeah.
whole the music world.
Definitely. Yeah, the music was a huge part. It was a huge part in the script, so I knew even going into my first meeting, I I made a list of all the songs referenced, and a lot of them I knew, and then the other ones I went and I found and I listened to. So even going into our first meeting, I wanted to be versed in the music, and then when I got the part, it was Mike was sending me so much music to listen to and things to read about music that it was great. I mean, I like anything where there's a lot of material to dig into, and Mike has such a specific read on all of it. And also he had wanted to be in a band when he was growing up and a teenager, so he cared very deeply about music and talked to me a lot about how his sister introduced him to music and art. So that kind of what was happening in the 70s was huge for him because it was all coming from her. And so Abby's character was that conduit.
I want to talk about this ensemble. One of the, some movies have a lot of famous people or great cast, but they don't necessarily work together. But here, the five of you especially, I mean, you have some great scenes together.
Yeah.
What was it like as a group?
Well, it was really, I memean, Mike had us, I have a lot of memories of working one-on-one with Mike, but then about 2 weeks before we started shooting, we spent, as a group, the five of us, spent every single day together rehearsing or going on field trips or having dance parties, and we did a lot of rehearsal that wasn't specifically about the scene, like getting the scene right. We did a lot of rehearsal where we improvised a lot. We really did have dance parties where every person brought a song that they felt represented their character, and then we all had to dance to it together. And it was incredibly bonding, and I think that in those 14 days we became a unit in a way, and we felt safe with each other and safe with Mike because we'd been foolish in front of each other and in front of him. And I think the biggest fear that actors have is that they're going to be bad and look silly, and in a way kind of allowing us to be bad and look silly before we started shooting, it just freed everyone up. And I feel very, very close to this group of people, and I think I hadn't felt that close to a cast except for in theater, honestly, because in theater you're so bonded because it's just you guys on stage, and in movies it can feel often very compartmentalized, like this is your day and then you go away, and then this is this other person's day and then they go away. And it felt like the five of us really had an organism going, as much as Annette and Lucas were the focal points. It felt like, I don't know, it's like we all felt like we were part of, honestly, a band, and Annette was the lead singer.
Well, talk about her a little bit. I've been admiring her for a long time now.
Yeah, me too.
Is she a good leader on a set?
Well, she's incredible. I'm as people go, I would say Annette Bening is probably one of my idols as a woman and as an artist and as an actor. And she's always chosen really interesting things to do. She seems to be, to me, she hasn't succumbed to some of the more superficial things that I feel like the industry could place on you. She's continued to do interesting, vital work, and she's funny, and she's sweet, and she's a prize fighter. Like when she's acting, she can hit harder than anyone, and it's so, I mean, for me, just to be around, to watch her work it feels like an education in film acting, but also in, honestly, just being a woman. And that sounds ridiculous, but I felt like in some ways I also felt this way about her, and Abby was supposed to feel that way about her, so it all went together for me, that Abby looked at her and was like, wow, that's the kind of woman I hope I will be. And that's how I, Greta, feel about Annette, and so it dovetailed nicely.
And the other end of the spectrum, I guess Just like in the movie, you're all teaching Lucas what it's like to be an actor and be in a film.
That's true. That's true. We are. It's funny because like so much of like what like in the rehearsal process, I had a lot of one-on-one rehearsals with Lucas, and in that, Mike said, "I want you to put on a song and dance with Lucas." And so I put on an Iggy Pop song, and Lucas and I started dancing, and I just started teaching him how to dance. I didn't know. I was like, "Oh no, you're not loose in your body." And then that actually, the next draft of the movie I got, that scene was in it, and that kind of thing is really that was what was kind of a magical alchemy about all these people, is that everything, the fictional world and the real world, kind of lined up. And Lucas was a very open, sincere, sweet boy who was not, who, even though it was his first film, he wasn't, basically his first film, he wasn't, he seemed like an old soul, which is what the character was like too.
Since you loved Abby so much, even from the very beginning of just seeing this, script, was it hard to leave her behind, and even more so than some characters you played?
Definitely. It's
Spinoff.
It's always hard to leave. For me, if I had a real connection with a character, it's always hard to leave them behind, because it feels like you just started to get to know them and live in their skin, but I mean that's the heartbreak of movies, but that's why I love them, is that they exist from point A to point B, and then they're gone, and I could see the appeal though of, like, if you had a character you really love, staying with them over like many seasons of a television show. But I think there's something about cinema, it's like that's all you get of these people, and it's heartbreaking, but it also makes it more meaningful.
In addition to 20th Century Women, you've got Jackie opening.
Yes.
And I've seen both of them now.
Yeah.
Tell us about working with Natalie Portman.
I also love Natalie Portman. I did a movie with Natalie Portman a few years ago, and we became friends and stayed friends. And I was actually I was at the tail end of working on 20th Century Women when I heard that Pablo was interested in me for Jackie, and I assumed that it was because he knew that Natalie and I were friends. I thought that maybe Natalie had told him, "Oh, I'm friends with Greta, maybe she..." And he did not know we were friends at all, which was really funny. And I remember I would talk to him on the phone, and I said, "Oh no, I'm friends with Natalie." And he was like, oh wow. And I was like, "You should probably call her to make sure she's okay with this," because I knew it was such a big undertaking for her to play Jackie. I just didn't want to be the person who stood in the way of like her creating her character. So anyway, but she was excited, and it was really, I mean, it was also extraordinary to watch her work. I think she's incredible in the movie. It's also like one of my favorite kind of performances. It's really like
Deep.
Swing for the fences, and she like knocks it out of the park. But I love that kind of acting, and it felt like watching her and Pablo work really felt like watching two auteurs match each other, that he's an auteur as a filmmaker and she's an auteur as an actor, and that they both met each other with equal strength. And I think that that's a really exciting thing, and I think sometimes you feel that with filmmakers and actors, that they're each bringing their best game, and they elevate each other, and that's what I felt on set, and that's what I felt watching the movie.
And you got your own directorial debut.
Yes.
Tell us what you can about the film, even though I guess it would be a 2017.
Yeah. Well, it's called Lady Bird, and it stars Saoirse Ronan and Lucas Hedges, who's in Manchester by the Sea, who's so great in it, and the indomitable Laurie Metcalf and Tracy Letts, and it's a coming of age story in a way, I'd say. And I'm still working on it. I'm only 3.5 weeks into editing, so it still feels like a brand new baby. And I can't really speak to what it is totally yet, but I'm really loving it, and I loved shooting.
What do you know about directing now that you didn't know a few months ago?
Well, in a way, I guess I knew more than what you would usually have a first-time director know, because I've been on a lot of film sets. I've had the privilege to be on a lot of film sets, and I had kind of been using that to learn as much as I could the whole time. And so there was a lot I knew going into it, but I would say the thing that I learned is this is such a small thing and it's such a technical thing, but when you're working on the schedule for a film, there's always a scene or an idea that you kind of put in a as TBD, that you're like, well, and then if we have time, we'll get this little piece or something. And what I have learned is if it is not scheduled, it will not happen. That is the thing that I learned. You will never have extra time. You will never get that little piece unless it is specifically in the schedule. Things that are to be determined don't really make it in. So I think that is the thing that I learned. That being said, I don't think we missed anything. It just I think I had a little bit more feeling of like, well, maybe we'll get to some of these things, and you just don't.
Well, this is a great time of your life.
Yeah.
Thanks for 2 wonderful movies, and
Thank
good
you.
luck with everything.
Thank you. I'm